Hey everyone, I'm a music video director from Charlotte, North Carolina, and today we're diving into some editing techniques. I'll be demonstrating this using the Big Dawg music video directed by Bennett for famous Dex, Rich the Kid, and Critch. A mixed media animation using Premiere Pro show you how to enhance it further in Photoshop and finish with a simple transition in After Effects. So let's get started. We're gonna need 3 clips today, 2 to transition between and 1 that you want your actual animation to happen on. So let's start with that animation clip and apply an effect called posterized time. We change this value from 24 to 8 since this is 24 FPS footage. Every frame will hold 3 times as long as it normally would, and it should look something like this. Next is going to be our paper textures. I personally always use assets from Studio AAA, like their printer trash pack for things like this, but if you don't already have paper assets, I've linked a free pack down below with 3 textures from Unsplash that I manipulated in Photoshop to do this job for us. Overlay the paper texture on top of your first clip. Now let's set our position and scale so that we're in the top left corner of this texture. Forward 3 frames and cut it. Now duplicate this texture, move it over to the left until there's only new parts of the texture showing. And this is where the assets from Studio AAA come in hand, because the free textures I provided down below don't have the highest resolution compared to something like this that is 8,000 by I think 11,000 pixels. So we'll just repeat this process, going left to right. Once we hit this right edge, we'll take the first clip, duplicate it, go down until something new is showing, duplicate, go over, and then repeat this process until you end up with about 1 second of footage. The more footage that you end up with, the more variance in your paper texture, but really you just need about a second's worth to make this work. Now, once you have all these textures laid over, it should look something like this. Highlight all these, right-click, nest, and I'll just name this something like paper animation base. Select that new nested clip, change the blending mode to either lighten, screen, or my favorite, linear dodge add. And if you notice, it's a little bit too bright. So let's go to this clip below, toss on a brightness and contrast adjustment, and bring that down by about 25. You can also reduce the opacity of the texture if it's a little too strong for your liking. I'm going to go with about 70%. Now we've got something like this. This is going to be the base for our animation. And that's pretty much it for the basic animation. You already have this nice effect that looks like we printed all these frames out on paper, even though we didn't have to spend any of that time or ink, and you have a great looking effect. Let's take this animation a step further by adding some graphics and illustrations. For this, we're going to hop into Photoshop, but first we need to grab screenshots from our base animation. So start on your first frame, hit this little camera icon right here. Make sure your folders are set up so you stay organized, but I've already done this. So we'll choose the first frame, go forward 3 frames until the next still appears. Take another one. And then we'll just repeat this process until you have all of your unique frames in a folder as PNGs. For this, I ended up with 10 unique frames. Now import these layers into Photoshop, and it should look something like this on your panel. Add a new layer above each of these frames so that we can draw on them non-destructively without ruining our original frames. For this, I have 10 frames and 10 layers to draw on. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to do a simple animation. Let's outline this fence. So we'll start on layer 1 above frame 1, and just start your line something like this. Then if we click on layer 2, while layer 1 and frame 1 are still showing, we can trace this line and extend it slightly further. You might think, oh, where did that line go? We'll just group these first 2 layers together into group 1 and hide that. Now you see, we've kind of got this line started. We'll repeat this process by clicking on layer 3, tracing out this entire first line we have, and then extending that stroke. Group these 2 layers together, hide them, and repeat this process until you're finished. Once you have all your frames grouped together with the new drawings, you can flip them on and off using this eye tool, and it kind of shows you what your animation is going to look like once we bring it back into Premiere Pro. This is just a really simple example. I recommend you take more time with this if this is for like an actual client piece, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just trying to save some time. Now go ahead and select all these groups, right-click, quick export as PNG, and choose wherever you'd like to store your frames. I like to store it in the same original folder and then call it something like edited. Save your Photoshop file, and then let's hop back into Premiere Pro. Now that we're back in Premiere Pro, go ahead and drop in that folder of frames that we just edited. Select them all, right-click, speed and duration, and then set this to 3 so that each frame holds for 3 frames instead of 1. Now add these in one by one right on top of your original base animation. Make sure that the order matches up. Sometimes when you import these into Premiere, they aren't necessarily in order. Now if you play back your animation, you should have something like this. Using this technique, you can add limitless detail to these animations. You can outline your subject, create a text animation, draw some fireworks, whatever you want. The only limit is your imagination. Now, if we take this into After Effects, I can show you the transition between these 3 clips. Let's go ahead and nest these frames that we just added in. We'll call this Photoshop animation. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and put it in between clip 1 and clip 2 from the video that I selected. We'll take all of these, duplicate them, highlight, right-click, and hit Replace with After Effects Composition. And this will open up After Effects right for you with a dynamic link between this project and your new AE file. Alright, now we're in After Effects. We have all of our files up here on the left in our project panel, and we have our sequence set up just like it was in Premiere Pro. You take this first PNG, drop it on top, go over 8 frames, Control-Shift-D to cut it, and then remove the rest. This should end 1 frame after the Photoshop animation, which is this little pre-comp down here, begins. Now, we take our Group 1 PNG, enable Motion Blur and 3D. We're on the very last frame. Hit P to open position, S to open scale, and R to open rotation, and keyframe the position, scale, and orientation of this layer. Hit U to show all active keyframes, and go back to the first frame of this clip. Change the orientation to about 300, scale to about 120, and then move the position around so that it comes forward and down at the beginning. Now if you highlight all of these and hit F9 to easy ease them, you'll get something like this. U again to close all these keyframes. Let's take Group 10 PNG, which is the last frame we exported from Photoshop. Same thing, make it last 8 frames. This time, it should start 1 frame before the Photoshop animation ends. You go to the last frame, you can key. Now we're going to go to the first frame and kind of do this in reverse. So first enable Motion Blur in 3D, hit P for position, S for scale, and R for rotation. Keyframe all these values. And then don't go to the last frame, but go to the second to last. Because if we go to the last frame, it disappears. And we can't really see what we're doing. But we'll adjust that later. So from here, we're going to set this orientation to about 60. No. So from here, we're going to change this orientation value to around 60. Scale to about 120. And then we'll move it again forwards, but instead of going down, this time we're going to go up. Highlight all of these, F9 to easy ease, and then when we play it back, you'll see it comes in from the bottom and goes out from the top. This is already a pretty sweet transition, but we can make it better. Let's add some impact. With our Photoshop animation selected, go up to the top right corner, hit Effect, Expression Controls, and then add a slider control. Over on this Photoshop animation, hit P to open position, and then Alt left click. It's going to open our expression panel. Here, we're going to type in wiggle, left parentheses, 6, comma, and then before you type anything else, grab this pick whip tool right here, which is this little swirly thing. Click and drag that up into the slider control. Now, what this is basically saying is the first number is the speed of the effect, and then the second number is how far it's moving. So this is at a speed of 6, and then whatever our slider value is will be how many pixels around the screen the animation moves. On the first frame of our Photoshop animation, keyframe the slider control. Go forward 3 frames and set the value to around 25. Go forward 3 more frames and set the value to 0. Hit U to open up these keyframes, select them all, F9 to easy ease, and you see right here, there's some pixels that are showing. This is because there's not enough resolution for it to move around the screen. So you can fix this by just simply hitting S to open scale and bring it up to like 105%. It's not enough to change your composition, but it hides these empty pixels. Now, when you play it back, you get something like this. We can still take this one step further by adding a brightness and contrast adjustment. Still with our Photoshop animation selected, go ahead and apply a brightness effect. Keyframe the first slide, go forward 2 keyframes, change the value to 150, go forward 1 frame, 75, and then 1 more frame before setting it to 0. We're not going to easy ease these, but look at the effect we get now. This gives us a simple flash that helps complement the impact we added and ties together the entire transition. That's pretty much it for these techniques. If you want to take things a step further, you can look into plugins like Brian De La Mata's Shake Sauce and Sapphire's Shake Effect to dial in those impact hits. And there you have it. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more content. Till next time, happy editing.